How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Data here with a breakdown and analysis of what is the biggest trade in recent memory in the National Hockey League. As today, Erik Karlsson has been traded from the San Jose Sharks to the Pittsburgh Penguins. The full deal here on your screen to look at, as it was a 3-team deal involving the Montreal Canadiens as well. I already did an instant reaction and analysis of this trade. I'm going to break it down a bit more concisely here for those of you who want to just get the X's and O's, who wins, who loses, and why. We'll break it all down quickly as we go through what the 3 teams got. Could they have gotten more? How do they come out, and how do their teams shape up moving forward? So let's break it all down right away. The Pittsburgh Penguins in this huge blockbuster received the biggest piece, 100 plus point Erik Karlsson, coming off of his 3rd Norris Trophy this past season. Erik Karlsson, his $11.5 million cap hit, around 13% retained, $1.5 million. So Erik Karlsson on Pittsburgh will be making $10 million for the next 4 seasons. We'll break it all down. The money situation will be broken down a bit later on, but if you just want to look at that on paper right now, $10 million for the next 4 years on Erik Karlsson. They also receive Rem Pitlick from the Montreal Canadiens as they take a few pieces from Pittsburgh. They also get Dillon Hamaliuk from the San Jose Sharks, a 22-year-old prospect, and a 2026 third-round pick from the Sharks. Now, the San Jose Sharks, for giving up Erik Karlsson and retaining $1.5 million for 4 more years, they receive a 2024 first-round pick from the Penguins, which is top 10 protected. They also get 31-year-old Mikael Granlund, signed for 2 more years. Jan Rutta, 33-year-old defenseman, signed for 2 more years. And Mike Hoffman from the Canadiens, 33-year-old forward, signed for 1 more year. Now, the Canadiens, in all of this, they take Jeff Petry at 25% retained. His $6.25 million salary, 25% of that retained by Pittsburgh. Canadiens taking the other 75% of Jeff Petry. They will likely be flipping him as well in the coming days. They receive him. Casey DeSmith from the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins now with Tristan Jarry and Alex Nedeljkovic. Too many goalies. They move Casey DeSmith to the Canadiens. They also now have too many goalies with Jake Allen and Samuel Montembeault. We'll see what happens in that situation. The Canadiens also receive 22-year-old prospect Nathan Legare and a 2025 second-round pick from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now let's break this all down. Erik Karlsson, we already know. We'll start with the Penguins side and what they received. We already know how good Erik Karlsson is. We don't gotta be surprised. We don't got to be shocked. I don't got to say too much, really. 3 Norris trophies. He's coming off of one of the greatest offensive seasons ever from a defenseman. Amazing passer, excellent shooter, as Jay Fresh says right here in his description. Also, an extremely poor defender who sacrifices a lot to make that offense happen. So when you take these numbers and put them all together over the last 3 years of weighted average data, Erik Karlsson is projected to be in the 75th percentile in wins above replacement in the league. Wins above replacement essentially meaning your value and the wins that you provide to your team above those that are provided by that of a replacement level player. For Karlsson being a defender, a replacement level player being a 7th D-man who would be scratched / in the AHL, stuff like that. Someone who's not quite good enough to make the 3rd pair. So he's in that 75th percentile of all players in the league, but that is largely and almost exclusively due to his even strength defense being at the bottom of the league. However, his even strength offense is in the top percentile of the league, the 100th percentile. His goals per 60 value, 97th percentile. Primary assists per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 play, 99th percentile. 97th percentile for drawing penalties. 97th percentile for finishing his opportunities, his chances. 85th percentile in his value on the power play. 79th percentile in the level of competition that he plays against. He plays against the top 25% of players in the league, the top quarter. His teammates, however, are only in the 53rd percentile, so he's playing with slightly above average players, but not like he's being carried by his team. So these numbers are even more impressive when you look at his teammates being in the 53rd percentile. He's not playing with amazing teammates out there. Those are the last 3 years. If you look at just his Norris winning 2022-23 season, you'll see a lot of metrics right here that have him in the 96th, 99th, 100th percentile, among the top in the league, if not the best, in primary assists, chance assists, neutral zone shot assists, shot contributions, finishing, wins above replacement, etc., etc. You can see all his numbers right here. So Erik Karlsson brings a ton of value to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Does it hurt them a little bit defensively? Does it make you wonder a little bit with already Tristan Jarry not being the most solid goaltending option? Absolutely. But I think his offensive value is just so much that it greatly outweighs the hit on defense that would be taken by having Erik Karlsson as a part of your blue line. Now, in this deal, the Penguins also acquired Rem Pitlick from the Montreal Canadiens. As a Canadiens fan myself, I like Pitlick. I think he's a good energy guy. As you can see, he has a fourth line role. He's versatile, can play center, can play the wing. As Jay Fresh says here, depth forward with decent finishing touch. Nothing too crazy. 8th percentile in the league of projected wins above replacement over the last 3 years. 71st percentile finishing and 81st percentile of primary assists per 60. Now, of course, that's with a very small sample size of fourth line ice time, but still interesting to see that in his small opportunity, in his small showings and per game, he was able to be effective. So I like Pitlick a lot. I think that's a great piece for a team like the Penguins that need valuable players at low AAVs in their bottom 6. So that's essentially it for the Penguins on paper. They get Karlsson and Pitlick today. They get Dillon Hamaliuk down the road. He is a 22-year-old prospect. I don't think he is going to be too much, unfortunately. A former 55th overall second-round pick in 2019. Didn't have the craziest numbers in the WHL. He never went above point per game or anything as a left winger. He had 9 points in 44 games in the AHL in 2021-22, and in 2022-23 only played 6 games in the ECHL, where he did get 7 points in 6 games, 34 penalty minutes, surprisingly. So Dillon Hamaliuk, will he ever make the league? I wouldn't bet on it. Wrapping it up here with what the Penguins get in this trade, Erik Karlsson coming off of a 101-point season. He scored 243 points in 293 games in parts of 5 years with the Sharks. He's had Norris votes in the majority of his career. First runner-up twice, winning it 3 times as well. So top 2 5 times in his career. And his 82-game average in his career so far is 68 points. I would say I would conservatively put Karlsson's 2023-24 point totals at point per game. I would probably see him getting around 85-ish points with the Penguins having such a good power play, such a high level of teammate support for Karlsson, but I'm not sure if he'll quite crack 100 points again. Rem Pitlick, as I just mentioned, gets it done in small sample sizes. He was playing a little under 13 minutes per night with the Canadiens this last season, scoring 15 points in 46 games. Not too shabby. He had 26 in 46 the year before that. So with the Canadiens, 41 points in 92 games. Hey, that's not too bad. If you can score 30-35 points as a third, fourth liner, the Penguins will absolutely take that. So that's the Penguins side of things. Throw in a third-round pick as well. You get Erik Karlsson for 4 more years at $10 million. Throw in Pitlick, throw in a prospect just as maybe as a whatever, and a third-round pick. Now, this is good for the Penguins because they also gave up a first and a second in this deal, a first in 2024 and a second in 2025. So by recouping a third in 2026, the Penguins, although they are in win now mode and they are not really caring too much about picks, a la Tampa Bay Lightning perhaps, they still have a solid little group here. The next 3 years, you would want to have 9 picks in the next 3 years of the first 3 rounds, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. They have 7 out of 9 possible draft picks in the next 3 rounds over the next 3 years, only missing their own first in 2024 and their own third and their own second in 2025. So when you look at teams that are in that win now mode with their aging core, there are a lot of teams that are in a much worse spot. Like, yes, of course, the rebuild will come in Pittsburgh, come 2026, 2027, 2028, etc. The Penguins will likely be in a rebuild. However, it won't be as painful as the rebuilds of other teams. I don't think the Penguins have the deepest prospect pool, but hey, Poulin's out there, Owen Pickering's out there, Joel Blomqvist's a great goalie prospect. The Penguins already have some good pieces, and they're not giving up a ton to have that all-in tag maintained. They're not on the downswing in 2023-24. By adding Erik Karlsson, they're back right up there in a contender's spot without having given up any of their prospects or anything more than a first and a second. And that first is even top 10 protected. So they give up a first that's likely going to be in the late 20s, you would think. So I love this deal for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But let's look now at what the San Jose Sharks get out of this deal. The Sharks, understandably, they knew that they weren't going to get a ton depending on the salary retained for Erik Karlsson. Yes, he won the Norris Trophy. Yes, he's just scored 100 plus points, but he's making $11.5 million for the next 4 years as a player who is currently, let me see when his birthday is actually. He is currently 33, and he turned 33 in May. So he just turned 33, and when his contract expires, he'll be 37. So, he won't be 38, he won't be 39, he won't be 40. Erik Karlsson will still have value as a 33, 34, 35-year-old. So I like this very much for the Penguins in terms of getting Karlsson without having to be too worried about the money, but also getting a little bit shaved off at 1.5. Now the Sharks shaving off 1.5 meant that they're going to have to get a team willing to take a 10 million AAV for 4 years. The Penguins were willing to do so. However, there is always going to be risk in that, especially when Karlsson was thought to be one of the not so great contracts in the league in 2020, 2021, and so on before his big season last year. So the Sharks understandably weren't going to get as much as they could have were he, let's say, 50% retained, but at about 13% retained, they get back a first-round pick, which will likely be in the late 20s, Mikael Granlund, Jan Rutta, and from the Canadiens, Mike Hoffman. I don't like this for the Sharks, not because just the value isn't high enough in my opinion, but also because I don't think this fits their timeline at all. Granlund is 31, Rutta and Hoffman are both 33. The Sharks are not really in the position to be making a push right now. The Sharks have a lot of young talent. I'm thinking William Eklund. I'm thinking Thomas Bordelot. I'm thinking Philip Bystedt. I'm thinking about players who are still fairly far away, and getting players who are signed for 2 years as a 31-year-old, expiring UFA 33-year-old, signed for 2 years as a 33-year-old. This doesn't really help the Sharks when they're going to need the most help. So looking at it back in the J Fresh here, looking at what the Sharks received here. In his description, Mikael Granlund, a pure playmaking forward whose defensive limitations and lack of individual chance creation hold him back a lot, but he is a great passer. Despite these tough numbers, he is still in the 53rd percentile in the league for primary assists per 60 over the last 3 years. As you can see, his value drastically dropped off and then got even worse as time has gone on. I think he'll recover a lot in San Jose. I think he'll do much better than he has been doing. However, I don't know if Mikael Granlund is really what the Sharks need. He's the youngest piece that they got back. In a perfect world, his 82-game average is 52 points. He can be a 50-plus point guy, 60-point guy as a middle six centerman with Logan Couture and Thomas Hertl. Sure, but I don't know if it really fits. Granlund is the one that makes the most sense for me. Rutta and Hoffman, however, that's where it makes even less sense to me. Rutta is a veteran third-pairing defensive defenseman, 33 years of age, signed for 2 more years, good even strength defense, okay, pretty constantly in that, 25 to 30th percentile range. And Mike Hoffman, again, as a Canadiens fan, to put it delicately, this guy, I see him as a cone out there. Huge defensive liability, and just like a power play specialist who loves to shoot. He has not been good in his time in Montreal. Took a big dip, got a bit better in 22-23, but the last 2 years in Montreal have not been good either. Amusingly included in this trade, as he was on the Sharks for like 25 minutes a few years ago. He is a pure sniper who likes to take one-timers from distance. Not a lot of value there from Mike Hoffman. Now, looking at Mike Hoffman's numbers, he's also had great seasons, 30 goals, 50, 70 points, but over an 82-game average, he's a 56-point guy who's had a couple of 3 consecutive mid-30-point seasons, ranging in different games played, yes, but Mike Hoffman is not the guy that he was back on Ottawa, scoring high 20s, 30 goals, 50, 60, 70 points. Mike Hoffman is not that guy anymore. So, yes, the Sharks get value, but I need, and I stress this, I need to see the Sharks move these expiring UFAs to make it make more sense. If the Sharks get to the trade deadline from game 1 to 62, they use games 1 to 62 as a showcase for LeBlanc, for Hoffman, for Duclair, for all these guys, and then move them for more value, well, then it makes more sense. But as of today, looking at this trade, I And I think I'm comfortable to say that this is in the fleece category. Again, I understand Karlsson has a huge AAV. You're not going to get a ton of value back. There is just inherent value in the retention itself. Forget Erik Karlsson, as Cap Friendly put it here. Despite trading a 100-point right D and retaining $6 million in cap and $5 million in salary over the next 4 years, the Sharks receive a single first-round pick in draft compensation. Based on past trades, retaining $5 million in salary as a cap dump alone would be valued at a first-round pick. So for the Sharks to have gotten what they did based on what other teams have gotten in the past for salary retention, for the production as well, forget the production, just the salary cap retention, I'm surprised that the Sharks only got a first-round pick in this deal. Yes, the Penguins traded a second as well, but that second went to the Canadiens. The Sharks only get a first-round pick and 3 players who may be gone within 2 years. For Erik Karlsson, who, again, yes, costs a lot, but I would have to think, was expected to have fetched a much bigger return. At one point, we were saying a couple first prospects. That's what people were saying. Ty Smith, Owen Pickering. And in the end, it's 3 roster players who could be gone within 2 years, and a top 10 protected first-round pick. I don't like it for the Sharks. But again, it could turn into more as the years go on. Jan Rutta, finally, just want to look at him as well. Jan Rutta, defensive defenseman, third-pair guy, a couple cups in Tampa Bay. He blocks, he hits, he hasn't value. But just, again, on that Sharks timeline, I don't see it making very much sense for them. Going back now to the trade, and let's look at the Montreal Canadiens in this one. Essentially, they move out Mike Hoffman, who they wanted to move out anyways, without retaining salary. They move out Rem Pitlick, who did have value, and they retain 25% of Jeff Petry. In exchange for doing all of that, they get a second-round pick from Pittsburgh, Casey DeSmith from the Penguins. Well, it's all from Pittsburgh, a second-round pick from Pittsburgh, Casey DeSmith, and Nathan Legare. Now, Eric Engels put out some good thoughts here on why the Canadiens would do this trade. I'm going to read this out quickly. You can pause and read yourself if you want to just listen to me reading it. If you're doing something, you're just listening. This is going to be a quote from Eric Engels, and I'll let you know when the quote is over. There is no salary being retained by Montreal on either Pitlick or Hoffman. The Canadiens initially traded Petry in July of 2022 without retaining salary, along with Poehling, for Matheson and a fourth. They're now getting him back at $4.69 million, 25% retained by Pittsburgh, along with a second, DeSmith, and prospect Nathan Legare. Petry's $3 million bonus for this coming season has already been paid. There's a strong chance that the Canadiens will also trade Petry, if not before the start of the season, then by the deadline. Believe that they're already working on it. Not retaining salary on Hoffman or Pitlick was key for Montreal in this. They have open retention spots, and retaining 50% of Petry's contract turns Petry into a $2.34 million cap hit this season and next, and that could open up a wider market for his services. He has a 15-team no-trade list and will have to consider being flexible with it if he really doesn't wish to return to Montreal. But Montreal was not on his no-trade list. As of now, he's a Canadian, and if he remains a Canadien when the season starts, he still improves their right side D, and I think that's how the Canadiens see it. Casey DeSmith comes in as security as a position of need, with Caden Primo having to go through waivers if he doesn't make the Canadiens out of camp. Either way, his addition creates flexibility for the Canadiens. Maybe it opens them up to an Allen trade down the line, especially if Primo unseats him at camp. Bottom line, if they lose a goalie, they have another one with NHL experience in the fold now. It's also a possibility, and not necessarily a likelihood, but certainly a possibility, they'll carry 3 goaltenders on the roster to start the season. As for moving Pitlick and Hoffman out, Pitlick was open to another opportunity after the way his season went down, and Hoffman had to go. The Canadiens have freed up space for young players up front. End quote. I think that exactly sums it up. The Canadiens now move out players they didn't need, namely, they move out Mike Hoffman, who they didn't need or want. Pitlick, who has a better opportunity to be in Pittsburgh. They free up 2 roster spots, receive a draft pick. They'll likely receive more from Jeff Petry being moved as well. And they also have the goaltending flexibility because now Caden Primo, at this age, with his experience in the league, he'll have to go through waivers if he doesn't make the team. So you have Allen, you have Montembeault, you have Primo, you have DeSmith. Those are 4 options right there. Definitely someone's getting waived or moving down or getting traded. That is going to be even more value coming back into Montreal after that. So just looking at who the Canadiens acquire now in terms of their value, we know Jeff Petry has value in and of himself despite having taken a bit of a step back this past year. He's a veteran top four defenseman who likes to shoot from the point and has a solid finishing touch for a blue liner. Definitely dipped a bit last season, but he didn't completely fall off. And now, especially considering that he could be used as a defenseman who has a cap hit of $2.34 million should the Canadiens retain more salary, there are going to be a ton of teams who are interested in taking Jeff Petry for 2 years at less than $2.5 million. His even strength offense and even strength defense are both slightly above league average. Great goals per 60, solid primary assists per 60, amazing finishing for a defenseman, as Jay Fresh says, and he has been playing with high levels of teammates. Now, remove his level of teammates by a little bit, reduce that a little bit if he were to go to, say, Detroit, a team that makes a lot of sense for him as being from Michigan. I think that his numbers would probably stay around where he's been or go down a little bit more, but I think that he would be, again, extremely valuable at under $2.5 million. So Jeff Petry to the Canadiens. The Canadiens will use him on the right side. He wasn't on the no trade list. Maybe he was hoping that he wouldn't get traded back and use that spot for a different team, but regardless, he's on the Canadiens now, and he's likely going to be flipped, if not now, then certainly by the deadline. The Canadiens also get Casey DeSmith, who is one of the better, and by one of the better, I mean probably one of the top half backups in the league. Not just a backup, but a 1B. He had 45% of the games last season when he was splitting with Tristan Jarry. I like him a lot. I know he has been pulled a lot. I know he's had a lot of trouble, honestly. I know he's not been good at important moments. But overall, looking at his entire career as a 32-year-old, I do like Casey DeSmith. He's been a pretty reliable backup for the Pens while often having to take the starter's net due to injury, says Jay Fresh. Even strength wins above replacement, 83rd percentile. Low danger, he's extremely good. Medium danger, he's solid. High danger, he's still above average. Rebound control is among the worst in the league, but he does have enough quality and even excellent starts to say, hey, I like this guy. Bad starts also around that league average. So Casey DeSmith, in and of himself, he does have value. He is an expiring UFA. And again, it screams another possibility of this guy could be moved to recoup even more value. The last piece in this deal the Canadiens receive, Nathan Legare. They get a hometown prospect. He is a long shot to make the league. I don't just say that by looking at, the fancy number says 1%. He won't make it. That's not fair. I'm saying that because of his numbers as well. Legare, he just slightly went above point per game in the QMJHL, which was an extended career there. Third round pick in 2019, played like 2-3 more years in the Q. In the AHL, 16 points in 57 games in 21-22. Last season in 22-23, he scored 19 points in 68 games, 76 penalty minutes, -17, not numbers that bode super well. So Legare, I'd say it's fair to think of him as a long shot to make the league. Looking back at the numbers here, Jeff Petry, even if he's taken a bit of a dip offensively, 31 points this past year when he's more typically in the 40-point range, he still blocks over 100 shots a year. He still throws close to 200 hits a season as well. He still has a lot of value, again, especially at that AAV. 82 game average in his career is 172 blocks and 172 hits, 127 blocks. I was reading that backwards here. He threw blocks hits, and that's, no, I wasn't. This changes here, hit blocks. Okay, so there you have it. After 1 year in Pittsburgh, Jeff Petry is gone. Casey DeSmith, he's been a lifer on the Penguins. He has filled in well when called upon. 58, 44, and 15 in his career. 912 save percentage and 2.81 goals against average. I like him for the Canadiens. You can think about all the different permutations for the Habs. Montembeault, Allen, is there going to be an injury? Is there going to be a trade? Is there going to be waivers? It could be a lot of different things that go on here, but regardless, the Canadiens get value. Petry could become a second or a third. DeSmith could become a second or a third. Legare, hey, play him in Laval, and good de chez nous. Canes fans are going to love that. Add in him being a second round pick in exchange for dumping Hoffman for free and giving Pitlick another opportunity. This is a huge masterclass for Kent Hughes. Also masterclass for Kyle Dubas. While the Sharks, although they get to free up $10 million, that's great. That's a lot of value to free up $10 million. They get 3 pieces that just don't fit their timeline. They get value, yes, but value that is incongruous with what they're trying to do in San Jose at this time. They need to trade those pieces for other prospects and picks to make it make sense. So the Sharks today have 3.991 in value, but heading into 2024-25, they'll have a ton of free space, only currently committing 26.25 to their forwards, 16 mil to defense, 2.3 to their goaltenders, and then unfortunately the dead cap, 4.2 in dead cap for Burns and Karlsson, buyout for Martin Jones. That's 5.88 million in dead cap right there that's being eaten up. Then the rest of the team with the forwards, defense, and goaltender, that brings them to just over 50 million. With the cap going up to maybe 85, 86, 87 million in 2024-25, the Sharks are going to have, yes, a lot of spots to fill, but probably like 35 million to play with. So that's incredibly valuable for the Sharks heading into 2024-25. But again, I'm not sure what their plan's going to be by then. Hertl will be 30, Couture will be 35, Vlasic will be another year deeper into that contract and he'll be 37. I really want to know what's going on in Mike Grier's head right now and what his long-term plan is. I'm not saying he's lost and they got fleeced and it's terrible, but it is a big win for the Pittsburgh to have gotten all of this value without having given up much in terms of future value. Usually in these bigger trades, you think in the present day, okay, the team getting the big player wins, but in the future, the other team who traded away the big player wins. But no, the Sharks are just banking on that 2024, let's say 26th overall pick becoming something, and hopefully Granlund, Rutta, and or Hoffman turning into other picks and prospects come the 2024 or 2025 deadline. So to wrap it all up here, I think that the Penguins win big in this deal. Even if Karlsson does regress over the next towards the end of his deal, I think having him on that blue line is going to be very valuable for the Penguins window that has just been propped open a little bit more over the next few years. The Sharks, jury definitely still out on whether it's a win or a loss, depending on what happens with Granlund, Rutta, and Hoffman, and of course that first round pick. I would say that the Canadiens are the team that win the most in terms of guaranteed lock-it-in value, because they get, no matter what happens with Petry, DeSmith, Legare, they get a second round pick, they get to dump Mike Hoffman without retaining salary. This is great for the Habs, great for the Penguins, and jury still out for the Sharks. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on this deal down in the comments here on YouTube or over on the Discord server. Links in the description. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on this one. Definitely a lot to see over the next few years on what this trade means, but I think this is huge for the Penguins. It definitely puts the Metropolitan Division on notice. You got to think that the Penguins, the Hurricanes, and the Devils are the top three teams in that division. The Rangers, the Islanders, they got to, and even the Capitals, they'll have to really have a strong push if they want to have a chance in the Metropolitan. Pens fans, let me know how you're feeling about Kyle Dubas, his first offseason as Pens GM. Huge splash with this acquisition today. Funny, you have Phil Kessel leaving the Leafs, wins 2 cups with the Penguins, his third with Vegas, close to 1,000 points in his career. People are calling him a bum. And now you have Kyle Dubas, called a bum himself, leaves Toronto, goes to Pittsburgh, makes this big deal. Where will the Penguins finish in relation to the Leafs? That'll be an interesting thing to keep track of. If you enjoyed the breakdown, be sure to check out the rest of the channel, as we're currently doing an NHL 23 franchise mode series with the Pittsburgh Penguins. We're a few years down the road and won't be able to get Erik Karlsson, I don't think, at this point. We are having a great series with the Penguins, and we'd love to have you join the booth as an assistant general manager. Of course, a lot else going on the channel, breaking news and analysis in the real world of hockey, like the breaking news video when Karlsson was traded, as well as NHL 23 career simulations. All of that here on the channel, so if you enjoyed this, take a second to check it out, and we'd love to have you join the team. So once again, thank you for taking the time to listen to this breakdown, and I'm looking forward to reading your thoughts and seeing you again in the next one.